Hello.
So James, okay. Yeah. Yeah, what time does it start?
I think we're giving a little bit more time for the board.
Okay.
Because all of the numbers listed are.
Got to charge them next time, otherwise,
Okay.
yeah,
I have a real job. My two teenagers.
yeah. Exactly,
I was gonna say his full-time job is.
yeah.
Exactly. I have a 16-year-old. Different area. And then there's traffic. I'm sure you do that. What? Yeah, what time is that? Oh. At the end. It goes quicker. I think this is a special route. How are you? Oh dear. So, I don't know.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're going to get started. We're a few minutes behind, but that's okay. Thank you for joining us for the South Florida Transportation Surtax Roundtable discussion. We have invited representatives from both Broward and Miami-Dade County to come and talk with us about how they planned, campaigned, and are now implementing a transportation surtax in their counties. We have this morning from Broward, or this afternoon from Broward, Greg Stewart from the Broward MPO, Tim Garland from Broward County Transportation, and Gretchen Consini from Broward County as well. And then after them, we will have Javier Betancourt from the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust from Miami-Dade County. And so I'm excited to hear from all of them. So I'm going to kick it off first with Mr. Stewart from Broward MPO.
And it stays on, even better. Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Greg Stewart. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the surtax efforts in Broward, both successful and unsuccessful, and in our case, the MPO's role in assisting in getting the surtax passed. And then I'll hand it over to Gretchen and Tim, who will take it from there, because once it's passed, it's back into the county's court. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in Boca Raton, and in the Boca Raton I grew up in, there were multiple referendums that I participated in as a child, including the multi-use trails, as well as the acquisition of all the oceanfront for parks. I had a great opportunity as a child to watch referendums be placed on the ballot, but in particular, I also got to participate in actually, getting the community to commit to taxing themselves for said projects. And I think that's kind of important when we start having the conversation about the MPO's role in dealing with a surtax, because it is not exactly, it's not an easy role. And it's something not for the faint of heart either. So the efforts are very, very large. Can I go to the next slide? Or is there a clicker? For those of you who don't know, that's actually in Hollywood, city of Hollywood. That's actually one of the beaches, and that was paid for with some federal funds, the trail. All right, so I'm going to talk about vision first, and this is actually very important to actually move forward with understanding the MPO's role in trying to get the voters to pass different types of tax referendums. In 1972, the Broward Area Planning Board, which was the precursor to the MPO, developed a vision document for the way Broward County should look, both on transportation, land use, governance, as well as dealing with water, sewer, and so forth. The plan itself actually can hold about 2.4 million people. Broward is just shy of 2 million at this time. And that plan actually has been sitting with the Broward MPO since its conception in 1977. We actually freshened it up, called it Vision 2100. So that way we have a plan moving forward and looking at how the different increments of funding can help build the plan and ultimately the vision that Broward County was actually designed to be. The land use plan sits at the base of that. It looks like a lasagna. And then as you build up, it goes into densities and intensities of the different parts of the plan where we anticipate the highest levels of growth. And sitting on top of it for today's conversation is actually the transit systems plan that we developed. It is, like I said, a vision to 2100. So I always look at this as a plug and play model for our partners at Broward County. As they implement whatever route they choose to go forward with the surtax, this plan actually can sit with them. Our 25-year vision, actually, when you get out of the 100-year vision, you go to the 25-year document. That's the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is important because this is part of parcel of communicating to the public, not this just long-term vision, but what the next 25 years will look like. So the 30-year surtax, if you go that route, will actually sit underneath your MTP, bridging a vision and your metropolitan plan. And ultimately, the reason why our MPO got involved with even dealing with a surtax is the 5-year TIP. For multiple years, our MPO actually had different processes and said, hey, we want a real commitment to transportation and to transit in particular. And every time we would go and approach the county operators, being Broward County Transportation, it was, well, we don't have the money to do this. We don't have the money to do that. We don't have the money to do this. And, you know, from a planning perspective, there's a lot of money at the federal government, obviously, but operations is the most significant thing. And there just wasn't money available for operations, not just of the transit system, but also the traffic signalization program and all the rest of the surface transportation stuff that was very concerning to us to move forward to get to the 2.4 million people that we believe the county can support. So as I was talking about, the revenues were limited on commitments. And so what we decided to do while we were getting the, well, we can't do this yet, is take our federal funds and actually do last mile connections to what we know is going to be a robust transit system when it comes out of the ground, and actually deal with how people can get to corridors that we believe transit will be operating on, and use as examples. These typically actually go back over to the local governments to maintain, and they can put that into the CIP for them to move forward. We also had a little bit about that funding issue, again, being limited. So there's even on the federal side, and now the infrastructure bill is going to help, but we also had tactical urbanism stuff that we also do with our communities, where we go in and paint the streets temporarily just to see what it was going to look like, how it was going to feel. This is actually at a walk to school event where we were actually painting the ground for the crosswalks. But a great example of a tactical urbanism project that turned into an infrastructure project is the Gulf Ocean Mall A1A project. It was originally built as a 6-lane facility. It was proved to be unnecessary at 6 lanes. We narrowed it down to 4 using paint and restriping. And at that point, we showed and demonstrated that that road could actually handle at that 4-lane. And we came back in with federal dollars for infrastructure and narrowed the facility down. It actually has created a huge economic boom along the storefronts in the Gulf Ocean Mall area. If you look at the Surtax and things that we can do with the Surtax, that's going to be where Gretchen and they're going to talk a little bit about that. The big picture for us, this is Wilton Drive. This is a state facility as well. We just won a federal award for this particular project because not only did we take the facility down from 5 lanes to 2, we also increased the throughput on that facility by 30% and also eliminated hazardous crashes completely. Since this was done, there has been no one killed in this segment. I'll keep knocking on wood. And, you know, as far as the pedestrian and bicycle crashes, they're down by 80%. So it's a significant area at night. There's a lot of activity here. So this was actually one of the great prides. Secretary Buttigieg from USDOT presented us an award on this effort. This was a partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation, who usually delivers most of the MPO projects in our region. So we're really happy with our partnership with the DOT, with the district. And, you know, these are examples of how you do this. But I want to talk about the tax. And that's actually kind of an interesting area. So we actually started an effort after the, I want to say 2035 long range transportation plan to actually figure out how to get operating dollars over to our partners. And we actually created an effort called Speak Up Broward. Speak Up Broward has lived through its livelihood. It actually did what it was intended to do. And so the MPO started investing money in communicating with the public, not advocating for a tax, but educating folks on how the transportation dollars actually come and why they may not see the systems that they have remembered in, you know, for those of the folks, a lot of people in Broward are from either New York or from Pennsylvania or New Jersey. And they're like, why can't we have this here? Well, there is, you know, reasons why. And we tried to explain this to them. Our team members basically went out into the field, not only talking to the elected officials, but with communities. And we met with all the various entities, whether it was from Urban League to the business community, the Alliance. We were constantly meeting and advocating with, this is what transportation and this is what's important about it. Steve Abrams, who's in the audience in the back, well, he was a city commissioner and a county commissioner. Now he's with Tri-Rail, and it's always a struggle just to have a regional system operating because all 3 counties are operating at different tax rates. And so that's going to hopefully, if you all move forward, you'll level the playing field on communicating that as well. It'll also allow for some other projects to move forward. And, that I think, our friends at the county are going to talk to you a little bit about. That said, that effort was very successful. Obviously, it culminated in a successful referendum, but there were 2 referendums prior to that were not successful. And so I kind of want to look at a little bit of what we saw as not being successful, and then focus on what success looked like ultimately for the county to receive. What, Gretchen, is it 390 million a year? What are you generating?
A little less because of the.
COVID? Okay, so let's say 370, 360 million. That's still a big number. And if you start having that conversation about where you can go with this, that's going to be important. Now, I was a Broward County employee at the time working in their planning department when the first referendum went out. It was actually done by the business community in Broward County, and it wasn't necessarily directly supported by the administration at the county, nor was it actually supported by a lot of different folks. So that referendum went out, it failed, but we learned a lot of lessons from it. And so we at the MPO took a strong look at why that failed, with focus groups and interviewing just the citizens on the street to understand what their concerns were and why they said, hey, we didn't want to do this. Interestingly enough, it was actually a lot about the plan itself that was proposed versus the need. And so, you're going to see, as the county presents this side of the story, that the plan itself was a little more loose than what was proposed by the business community. The second go around with the infrastructure tax was not an easy road. It was actually decided that they were going to do infrastructure and transportation, half penny each, tied together. And basically in all directions we were looking at with focus groups and all the rest of it, that actually looked like it was going to pass. In fact, the transportation portion of the half penny did pass, not by a wide margin, but it did pass. And the infrastructure side failed. So both referendums failed. Our focus groups after the failure there actually was an interesting learning explanation on this. The way the ballot language was written on the transportation side, it was a straightforward yes or no. On the infrastructure side, it was actually, will you increase your sales tax by 0.05%, which is a half penny. However, that was read as we went to our focus groups as a 5-cent increase. So the massive voter turnout actually that turned that down, from what we learned from it, was actually the ballot language actually made a very big difference. It passed in areas like Pompano, it passed in other areas of this county, but it didn't pass where it needed to pass. And that is why one of the biggest parts of failure. So understanding that that was what had occurred, the only way, way forward on a taxing side, because apparently that's what the language is required for the infrastructure, is actually to do the transportation tax straight up. So that was the third try. Gretchen and her team, we joined them multiple locations, talking to folks. Our whole communications department, like you have here, your PIO group, was actually very busy pushing out, information via text, via cell phone data that we had to folks to actually let them know, hey, this referendum is out there. And this is the thing that we were talking to them about. This will allow the county to be able to move forward on alternative transportation programs to actually make a difference in our community. So that Speak Up Broward effort for about 8 years in total ultimately came up with a success. The database that we developed during the time of developing the overall program was extremely important. And we believe that that helped the county push it over the threshold and to the level of success. I think, Gretchen, was it 74%?
No.
It wasn't that high, 70?
Like 61.
I'm sorry.
It was closer to 61.
Okay, 61%. That's a big success when you're asking somebody to raise a penny in that type of environment. So we look at this and say, all right, well, these are the things that we work together on. It is important for us at the federal side of the agency that this moves forward. We're waiting with bated breath to see which projects the county wants to move forward with. On the Surtax side for federal matching, We also look at our local governments and help them develop their plans necessary to actually get the projects out into the field as well. Gretchen and her team have been wonderful to work with our team members in the municipal side and getting money into the government, local government's hands to start seeing initial successes. Broward County Transportation has purchased buses with huge pennies on them. And so people can kind of see where their money has been going. So that's actually a good way of communicating as well. But that's outside of the MPO's role. Our role was really about the communication side of why it's important. And I advise, this group, if you are going to move forward with a surtax here in the region, in Palm Beach part of the region, is to actually let the MPO do what the MPO needs to do, which is the education side. This is important to do X, Y, and Z. And then let the county do what the county needs to do, which is this is the product that they're going to deliver. And I think that is, the swan song I'm going to sing for this. And if that's okay, James, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues over at Broward County.
It is? Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. Again, I'm Gretchen Cassini, and I'm here with Tim Garling from Broward County Transit. I think that actually Mr. Stewart covered a lot of some of our initial slides, so I'm going to try to move pretty quickly through those. As Greg mentioned, the 2016 effort, which was half for infrastructure, half for transportation, was not successful. And so in early 2017, the Board of County Commissioners amended their overall strategic plan to include a pursuit of a full cent for a sales surtax. This was the actual language of their goal in their commission strategic plan. And we did have, which I think is extremely important to point out, Greg alluded to it initially, but it was not unanimously supported when they went out in 2006. And having that unanimous support from our policy body was incredibly important, I think, to the overall effort. There were a lot of things that were happening at that time in 2017. We had several presentations from statewide research groups that indicated that if we didn't do something dramatic with respect to public transportation, including paratransit, that we were really going to have an issue, because the general fund contribution to our transportation department, as Tim is going to talk about with you in just a moment, was continuing to increase. Sometimes during the middle of a fiscal year, we would have to come back seeking additional money because of the demand growth, especially in paratransit. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Garling.
And so with this slide, it's really kind of important to look at background information. What we were seeing, obviously, what many people call the silver tsunami, that we're just seeing the aging of the population all across the board. We're seeing people that were 85 and older were growing significantly. We're seeing big population shifts in the next 5 to 10 years, people getting to that 60 to 74 age group. And in a place like Broward County, almost 1 out of 4 people were over the age of 65. And with lifespans lasting longer, people were living longer and longer. So that did turn attention to public transportation. So it's not just sort of the demand response or special transportation, but all transportation ends up helping an aging community, lets people stay in their homes, have some dignity, still participate in society, get around to do the things that they need to do. But for those who can't, we had a paratransit type system. We call it TOPS, but that's that door-to-door service. And those services are extremely expensive. So facing this future of increased numbers of people who are aging, meant that we're going to be facing some significant fiscal issues with the paratransit system, and we need to figure out a way to get some kind of sustainable funding to get there. And we also had a very popular community shuttle programs. These were local, smaller mini buses in each of 18 municipalities in Broward County that connected to the fixed route system, but basically made fixed route trips around the neighborhood to help provide service. So there were a number of things that public transit could help address to kind of deal with those issues. So that was just one issue. So what the community was saying to us is that they certainly wanted better public transportation. They wanted better coverage. They wanted more reliable service. They wanted to see more public transit available, more frequency. Paratransit, we talked about that, and community shuttles were all part of it. But we heard almost every time we went out and talked to people, the biggest issue in Broward County was traffic congestion, signal synchronization. It was just hard to get around the county, and that's something that the public wanted to have addressed. Bicycling, more and more people are bicycling, pedestrian, that needed to be safer. We needed to have specific bike lanes and paths, pedestrian amenities. That was just going to be part of what the future would look like. More greenways, more open use, just adding to the livability of the area. And then, of course, we ended up with, on many of our routes and roadways, flooding and drainage issues from rain. So there were a number of issues that the community wanted addressed. So we worked hard to build a 30-year project-based plan, not sort of based on money, not based on promises, but actually get down to the work of making a plan. So, we worked off of the, both Gretchen and Greg have talked about the prior initiatives. That was a starting point. We worked off of that, but we developed a financial plan that really looked at a flexible multimodal future that could sort of withstand the population increases, that could increase our safety and could deal with innovations. We spent a lot of time figuring out very detailed, all 30 years of a plan on what we would do if we actually had this kind of funding available to us. So it was very intense. And one thing to take stock of is that, the future is not like the past or the present. So we put money into the program to look at innovation. Despite our best efforts of making a plan, we know that things are going to change in the future, and we needed to stay up on it. And we built that kind of flexibility into the plan and into our thinking. I'm going to talk about a little bit about some of the building blocks and some of the things that we looked at with this 30-year plan. It was certainly project-based. It was in collaboration with subject matter experts. We looked at what other people had done throughout the nation. We got input from local municipalities. We invited municipalities to submit a comprehensive list of transportation-related projects, no cost limitation, but we asked them what projects needed to be done in their communities that we could include as part of this 30-year plan. This whole effort coincided with the MPO's 2045 plan. And, so I think that's all important. We were looking at both the county transit system and those things that the municipalities felt they needed in their areas to help make a total transportation network to put that together. The cities updated and reviewed and refined this project list, and we had many meetings to discuss that. And the result of that was some $2.8 billion across 30 years of projects that these local municipalities wanted for their infrastructure. But of course, all the money doesn't come at one time. So there was always going to have to be an issue of prioritization, but that kind of defined the projects that needed to be done. Continue on, the extensive outreach occurred in 2018 to get outreach from the public about the projects and educate them on our proposed plan. Really important that we got the word out, and we spent a great deal of time doing this. One of the other issues that we had to deal with was a performance audit by OPAGA, the Office of Program and Performance and Accountability for the state. And I ended up spending quite a bit of time on this particular issue, almost 3 months. It was looking at all levels of how we were going to deliver service. They looked at our organization charts. They looked at our financial controls. They looked at our capacity to actually implement projects that were available. They looked at a number of factors. So it's an important piece, because the results of this audit actually had to be published in advance of the sales tax referendum for the public to see. And we came out with a very good report, and I think added just one of the pieces, but added to public confidence that our county had the ability to actually implement the money if we actually got it. The county commission determined that after the passage of the referendum, certain projects would be prioritized by the MPO. So we had all those projects, but you couldn't spend all the money in 1 year. So there had to be some effort to prioritize. So we sought out the help of the MPO to do that. So kind of to summarize a little bit, we wanted to design a local transit system that was going to be reliable, responsive, and accessible to the public. What we knew part of it and what we had in the plan was light rail was going to be studied and going to be in high capacity corridors, where it could really do some good. We included full funding for the community shuttle program. So instead of the local municipalities paying for those services, this sales tax is going to play all the complete costs of both capital and operating for the municipalities to provide those shuttle services. And even expanded services if necessary. And of course, that sales tax also presented the opportunity for us to have funding for a growing paratransit program. And certainly east-west, north-south connectivity, a big deal. We needed to get people moved across the county, north and south, east and west, but you also had to have a network that could move people around. So it was really a plan of total mobility. Back to Gretchen.
Thanks, Tim. So we talked a little bit about this being a project-based plan, and we needed to have the flexibility to accommodate future projects and innovations, as we knew that this was going to be an ever-changing landscape, and it's even more disrupted than we, I think, had even anticipated when we first started talking about this back in 2015. There was some low-hanging fruit. We work very closely with our school board, and they identify for us a variety of different safety improvements that they believe are necessary at various schools across the county. And we had not had the capacity to do as many of those as we would have liked. So we did have quite a few more school safety zones, very popular element of the program, as I'm sure you can imagine. Lots of resiliency and roadway drainage improvements. We are looking at hundreds of intersections across the county, especially, of course, prioritizing those that have safety concerns, near misses or collisions. One of the things that we did is we front-loaded the installation of fiber optics, because that really does create the backbone for us to be able to do adaptive signal control and other signalization improvements, and really started trying to create investments around data collection so that we have a clear benchmark. Where were we when this passed, and be able to communicate both to our oversight board and to the general public about the progress towards our overall goals. There were approximately 476 roadway, traffic, signal, bridge, and safety improvements that are actually managed by our Department of Public Works, which is not represented here today. And then most of those municipally requested transportation improvements that added up to that 2.8 billion, those are also mostly roadway. So, wow, I don't know what happened to this slide. All right, this slide is not as was intended. So I am going to try to read it to you, since I don't know what happened in translation here. There were 5 major goals of the transportation surtax. It was to create connectivity, to improve transit service, traffic system management, which is alleviating congestion. We really wanted to look at ways to enhance multimodal options. And then there was a really important component of this program around economic development and benefits. So keeping that local dedicated source of revenue moving throughout our community, improving the lives of the people who are paying that tax, and also trying to ensure that we were investing in our local small businesses. So the regulatory framework that we used for the program, of course, it starts off with the ordinance. We also had an interlocal agreement among all of the participating entities. So we have 29 of our 31 municipalities that are participants in the transportation surtax program and the MPO. So the county, the MPO, and our 29 municipalities entered into this interlocal agreement prior to the vote. And then, of course, once it passed and we started to try to operationalize the program, it was clear that we needed to make a few tweaks to that. And we've continued to do that as needed. And then, as Greg mentioned, we have an interlocal agreement with the MPO to prioritize municipal capital projects, of which there are many, many. And they have an annual process that looks at both the projects that were in the original plan that went to the voters, as well as offers those municipalities that are participating a way to apply for new projects. So we didn't have a lot of time to do our educational campaign. And so it really required a significant ground game. I wanted to give you an idea of what a piece of educational literature looked like. We had a lot of flyers, pamphlets, and we did do a great deal of social media and electronic communication from an educational perspective. On the left is the actual language that was on the ballot. And now I'm giving it back to Tim again.
Well, just to kind of pick up on the whole effort, we called it a penny for transportation. And really our leader, public leader was then County Mayor Beam Fur. And I have to give him a shout out because I attended many presentations with him, and his belief and earnest belief and sincere belief in the program just came out when he talked about it. And I thought that resonated every time that we made a public presentation, an educational presentation. That sincerity really came out. And I think he just did a really good job leading that program. So the educational campaign was very important. We were trying to let the public know what it was that they were going to get. We had flyers, brochures, posters, videos, banners, speakers bureau. We actually trained many of our staff on sort of what to say, how to say it, what you can't say. You could see the advocacy idea. As public employees, we could not advocate for the tax, we could just educate for it. So there was a whole kind of parallel advocacy program that was going on to really, support the program and to advocate for the passage. So our role, our big role, and I think it made a difference, just getting people an education about what investments were going to be and how those investments could improve their community. And certainly we had promotional materials and the like to back that up. So back to Gretchen.
So standing up the program was a yeoman's effort. It really was. And it took a lot of internal and external support to do something that there's not really a roadmap to do. Our ordinance clearly articulated that our county commission wanted there to be 2 layers of removal from them. So there was an appointing authority that was identified in the ordinance that would then come together to create and nominate and appoint an oversight board of professionals in 8 categories, and then 1 individual that actually works on supplier diversity for the Broward College. So we're trying to organize that, make sure that we got a good slate of candidates from that appointing authority to select from, orienting those individuals to the program, and really trying to find out what their expectations were, what were their needs, what type of staffing and legal support was going to be expected. We did our first action agenda in April of 2019, and we really started looking again at that low hanging fruit. What type of shovel ready projects did we have? What had we taken through design using other revenue sources like gas tax? At that same time, running parallel to that, there was a significant effort to negotiate our Surtax services agreement with the MPO to look at all of the municipal projects that had been submitted. And then a lot of outreach, because you can imagine when something like this happens, there's a lot of interest from every corner of your community, from business leaders to HOAs to all different types of vendors.
So in the implementation of the program, the transit improvement strategy was, we wanted to hit the ground running. We think that was an important part of it. And we'll say, I've been in the transit business almost 38 years, nearly 40 years. And one thing I know, I've worked all across the country, people will use transit that serves them, right? They are, people are rational. So the transit system has to be usable. It has to meet their needs. So we wanted to create a first-class transit experience and continue to create that experience, which is vital to getting people on the system, being able to use it, and having long-term ridership. Certainly using current technologies like mobile ticketing, things like that, where we can sell tickets to people on their cell phones, on their smartphones, certainly part of that strategy. Also having our view of any new technology that comes, willing to embrace it, and anything we can do to make the systems more convenient. Upgrading our bus shelters, our stops, our vehicles, using smart technology to let people know when the vehicles are going to come. All those things help connect people to public transit. Security, kind of important issue. People need to feel that they're going to be safe and secure on transit vehicles as it grows, and we certainly have strategies and increased presence on our vehicles. And again, Wi-Fi, just another kind of amenity that can be available on vehicles that makes the rider experience better. So just one of the issues is, and I always think transit kind of runs with the best tool for the job. So this is really talking about our fixed route service, those local buses that give you coverage and give a basic level mobility. So you can see on the left, those are the existing local routes that we had on our transit system. You can see that there were some holes in it over time, and we just didn't have the money to add additional routes. With the Surtax on the right side in red, you can see what our long-range plans are basically to fill in this network of local services. But there's also something else, right? We have high capacity corridors that will do that east, west, and north, south that we talked about. So you think of it as sort of like layers of transportation, serving needs, because public transit isn't just one need. People have different demands, different types of trips, and you have to build a network that is flexible and able for people to use. And as we kind of look to the future to put that all together, you can see that we are building that basic level of mobility, for our system. So I will turn it back to Gretchen.
So as you can imagine, there is a great deal of public interest in the program. The Oversight Board asked that we create both an internal and an externally facing dashboard about all of the various different types of projects. So it was something that was easy, accessible, very user-friendly. Where are the projects happening? What is on the horizon over the next 5 years? What's already occurred? And so there is going to be a slide where you can download that and play around with it. This is just a snapshot of our website. We did a lot of redesigning, actually, hearing from the MPO and the municipalities that were trying to utilize the website to get the information that they were looking for was really helpful, because we have so many different users and they have different needs. Trying to create a website that can address all of that in one place is a little bit challenging. Oops, sorry. Yes, that's right. We had to work on our branding because as you move from an educational campaign into implementation, it's a different message. And so we had a Segway brand that we kind of got rid of the penny a little bit, but we still say that things are funded by the penny for transportation. And we actually, 6,000 people that we surveyed. We did a lot of focus groups, and both locally, but also nationally in the transit industry to get feedback about our Segway branding, which we just implemented in February of this year. And so all the way to the right. This is a picture of the actual public project dashboard. And again, it's evolved. There've been several iterations of this even over the last 10 months. There's an interest, of course, by the municipalities. People like to see what's in their backyard. People want to look at it from a commission district standpoint. But the Oversight Board members were really interested in making sure that these investments were being made in an equitable manner. So we also do zip code analyses, and I'm happy to report that for fiscal year 2022, our investments in our historically underserved communities are significantly higher than they are in our other zip codes, and we were able to demonstrate that visually to them. So I'm going to, hopefully this will play. Nope. Well, I have a lovely video here, but I'm not sure if there's a way that perhaps James can help me show it to you. Okay, so definitely not the video, but you are welcome to go onto our website and check out the video for yourself. It's there, it's easy. We have a 1-minute version. Oh, there we go.
2 million people at the beach. 2 million people at the beach, on their way to work, headed to see grandma, constantly on the move. Each of us may be headed to different places, but we all face the same challenges going from point A to B: congestion and safely getting to where you need to be. In 2018, Broward County residents voted to do something about it, approving the Penny for Transportation 30-year plan. Using discretionary sales surtax, we would take mobility challenges head-on. Today, the plan is not just a plan. It's a program of smart projects that will innovate the entire county. MAP Broward projects will create connectivity, improve transit service, manage traffic systems, enhance multimodal options, while ensuring economic development and benefits. MAP Broward will improve technology and deliver transportation solutions intended to relieve congestion and create safer commutes.
To make our morning drop-off safer.
To make the commute to work easier.
To keep us pedaling towards a greener future.
Penny for Transportation is now Broward County's Mobility Advancement Program, or MAP Broward. Covering 16 project areas, MAP Broward's projects include electric and hybrid alternative fuel vehicles, and upgraded amenities in transit service. Resilience projects that upgrade road and bridge improvements. Traffic management systems that utilize fiber optics to react to traffic flow in real time. And other mobility enhancements that make walking, biking, and enjoying your community easier and safer. Build on foundational elements such as transparency, accountability, and resiliency by investing over $16 billion local dollars over 30 years and keeping these dollars in local small businesses. We also expect to be able to bring home over $2 billion of state and federal funds to grow the economic impact of MAP Broward on the region's economy. Because we know the destination is important, but so is the journey. We invite you to see what's on the horizon for your neighborhood. See it all right now on our interactive project dashboard. Get started now. Visit mapbroward.broward.org. Projects that upgrade road and bridge improvements.
It's always dicey when you try to show a video. I've never had it work properly. So our last slide was just some other information about our social media handles. And if you're trying to connect with us or get information, feel free to email me directly. You don't need to use Map Social. And I think we'll do the Q&A and discussion later. And it's time for me to turn this over to Mr. Betancourt, I believe, right, James?
We are actually going to open up Q&A for the Broward panel.
All right, great.
Mr. Chair, if it is all right, I would like to have the board, if they have questions, provide them. And then there's representatives from Palm Beach County in the audience. If they have any questions, then we can invite them to the podium as well. So starting with Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the presentation. I think that was certainly very educational. You point out something that obviously we need to come to grips with, which we can do education, but we can't do advocation. That's a word, can't advocate. So what did you do to create this advocacy? Who handled that responsibility, and how did you bifurcate that from the educational component that you could still fund?
It's an excellent question, and it's actually a really complicated answer because the business community had been engaged and very involved in the 2016 effort. And so they already knew that the 2018 effort was going to happen. And we have an entity, I believe you have one here. It's very similar. We have the Broward Workshop. We have the Alliance. We have several chambers. And they all got involved, and several large companies that obviously seek to benefit from having a sales surtax like this really took the lead. And they stepped up. They work on these types of initiatives, these very large international global companies. So they understand how they operate, and they brought the money. They did fundraisers. And what we did is we had a team of external consultants that we hired to help us with the educational campaign. And those folks would then get periodic updates about what the advocacy campaign needed. So we wanted to make sure that everything was very seamless, that what the advocacy campaign was putting out complemented what the educational campaign was saying. And our lawyers would evaluate every single piece of information that went out on our program to make sure that it never crossed that line into advocacy. And it was just a matter of having a good line of communication into the PAC so that we understood what was happening, and we were again being consistent in our messaging.
It sounds like it's a decentralized process of creating the advocacy. Did you have a centralized political committee or some entity that took responsibility for coordinating all those different advocates?
To some extent, there was more than one group that was engaged in doing advocacy, but they did coordinate with one another.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I've actually got a couple of questions, and to pick up where Mayor Weinroth led off with regard to the advocacy, did you all form a political action committee, or were several political action committees formed? How was that done?
There was a main political action committee that was formed, and then there was another group, and I can't speak to whether or not they formed a political action committee, but it was a loosely held together group of local individuals that were putting out information using their own funds and their own efforts to be able to actually say the words "vote yes."
And for the educational campaign, two questions there. Where did the money come from for the educational campaign?
General fund,
General fund?
yes.
And you say that your lawyers reviewed every bit of literature, whatever, to make sure that it wasn't crossing the boundary of into advocacy. And we say your lawyers for the county attorney's office, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. I'd also like to ask about the OPAGA review. That's a requirement of state statute. After you go ahead and you decide to move forward with this and you adopt the ordinance, and you've got your plan and everything else, by state law now, the program would need to be reviewed by OPAGA, which is an arm of the legislature. And then their report would come out shortly before the election campaign. Obviously, if their report came out negative, that would doom the election campaign, I would think. So the question I have with regard to the OPAGA review is, what are they reviewing for, and what do you think if Palm Beach County elected to go forward with the Surtax initiative? What do you think that Palm Beach County would need to do to better prepare for the OPAGA review?
Well, because we were the first ones, we were the guinea pigs for the state. I'm not sure if the process would still operate the same way that it did for us. And I definitely want to give Tim an opportunity to speak to this as well, because he spent hundreds of hours, maybe more, on the transit side of that audit. OPAGA hires obviously an independent audit firm. They had at least a dozen people working on our audit at one point, and they did on-site visits. They also had us transmit voluminous amounts of materials to them through electronic means. We had a team that was dedicated just to dealing with this audit. We had senior executive leadership from transit, senior executive leadership from our public works department. And then we had our CFO, our budget director, and several other folks, myself included. I basically was the coordinator. And they looked at, as Tim mentioned, your current operations, all of your systems. So your financial systems, your project management systems, they came in and they sampled particular projects, and they would get into detail on how the projects were managed, whether they were coming in on budget, on time. They looked at a variety of different enterprise-wide systems. They looked at our previous audits, our single audits, and from a programmatic and project side, I don't know, Tim, did you want to add anything specific that you went through?
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is they were very much interested in the capacity of the organization to deliver on investments. So they looked at our organization charts and asked us a number of questions about who the people were in the org charts and their capability to deal with a much bigger program than what we had we thought about it. They looked at various other, we're in the transit business, so the federal government does a triennial audit of the transportation agency. They wanted to see that. So they wanted to see, and they were looking for any comments or anything that any other reviewers had given, and how we reacted to it and how we prepared for it. So it was pretty important, I think, that that we had senior level leadership, Gretchen, and I spent a lot of time with the auditors, making sure that they got the information that they were asking for. And as Gretchen said, we were one of the first ones, if not the first one. And we're kind of, we're kind of learning as we went along, but they wanted to see expenditure information, financial control procedures. It was really, I've been through various federal audits for a long, long time. It was the most extensive audit of performance, management, and capability I've ever been through. So taking it seriously and making sure that staffing, senior staffing, who can actually deliver and explain and present information to them, I think is critical to making it go well.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out how much time they spent on the actual plan itself. So they really went through every layer of the Surtax plan that we were preparing to present to the voters, and asked a series of questions about some of our assumptions there as well.
Vice Mayor Reed.
Thank you, Chair. So were there any other parties that were considering putting a penny to work tax at the same time that you're working on this over the 8 years that it went through that could have been competitive on the ballot for that penny?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Good.
Mayor Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I know the pandemic, messed with everything. I'm sure your traffic went down a lot when everything was closed, and now that it's coming back up. What are some of the metrics that you use for traffic management? Is it the time for distance travel, or that's kind of what I'm trying to get more information. How does the fiber optics help with the traffic management, and what metrics are being used?
Well, it's a great question, and it's a question that I get from my oversight board members a lot. The truth is that we've implemented so few adaptive signal control projects that we don't have enough data to really be able to determine what the impacts are. They look at everything. As I mentioned, the first 3 or 4 years of the plan was all laying the fiber. And now we're just now starting to actually implement some of the adaptive signal control. I think traffic system management is bigger than just that, though. A lot of the efforts require collaboration between our traffic engineering division and FDOT. And, we share a space, I think you all do too.
Mhm.
And so some of what we did early on was just improve the technology that was available, some of the video technology. And I know on our system, there are a lot of improvements that need to be made to the existing system that Greg alluded to that were not, they just weren't financially feasible. So what we're trying to do is, as I mentioned, baseline where we are with everything. It is difficult. You're absolutely right because of the pandemic. Do you go back to 2019 data? But they're working on that. And I think probably within the next year, I'm going to have a much better answer for you than I do right now.
Okay, so I guess the question is that the metric aspect of it. So, we don't necessarily have the baseline, but what are you going to use to measure the traffic management? Is it time, or is it number of cars or people traveling?
Well, I think it's going to depend on what the solution is, which is what I was trying to articulate. So if we're doing intersection improvements and we're trying to create additional through lanes, it may be just number of cars through a particular light cycle. If we're trying to deal with near misses or collisions or congestion that's related to events, it's going to be a different metric. I can get you some answers from public works staff as what they're exactly looking at for the various.
So it's kind of a intersection by intersection sort of determination as you go through.
It might be corridor more,
Okay.
corridor by corridor, and then it'll depend on what exactly the issue was there. Because I know with some of the places that we're implementing adaptive signal control, the engineers are telling me that's really appropriate when you have very, very divergent volumes. But when you have congestion all day long and there's no real change in the volume, it's not going to work.
Right.
So you have to come up with different strategies and you may have different metrics as a result.
One of the things that, we're trying to do here is a separated bike lanes is that been included in the, I guess, map Broward as well?
Well, initially in our plan, we had a lot of greenways and we did have some separated bike lanes and multi-use paths. What we're struggling with right now is what's eligible under the statute and a pretty strict interpretation of the statute. So those types of projects have to occur as part of an overall roadway project. But yes, we are looking at that.
All right. And then the other thing I have written down is the fatalities. Is that something that it is more reactive than, I guess, proactive? Like you're not trying to prevent, I guess, if there's been a death within the past year, 5 years, 10 years, are you also including that in all the data that you have?
Well, safety is a huge component of it. And yes, we are trying to improve the safety, both of, vehicular and, non-motorized. That's a huge component of our overall program. A lot of that has to do with collecting good data. I think I mentioned to you that we're about to embark on a near miss study so that we're not just reacting to fatalities or crashes, but also almost. And yes, we're planning to invest Surtax money in improving safety.
The next I have on my list is equity. It's kind of like, I'm not looking at where the money's coming from, but where the money's going. And is it shown that it's more equal or to areas that are underserved?
Well, as you can imagine, in the early years of the program, when you're looking at actual need and you're trying to prioritize, yes, those historically underserved communities are getting a really good investment, especially in 2022. Our oversight board requires us to report on that every quarter.
Okay.
And obviously there's a real need to ensure that there's geographic equity since everyone is paying the tax. And we want to make sure that the money is getting out to every community as well.
And speaking of the money, I'm assuming that the county, the clerk's office holds the funds. And how does the distribution works? And are you partnering with municipalities to giving them the funds to implement their projects in their municipalities?
So actually the county holds the funds. We have our budget office manages and separates them. It segregates them into the trust fund. And then once the MPO recommends municipal projects for funding to us and the oversight board approves it and the commission then appropriates those dollars. What we do, the strategy that we're trying to employ is once that contract for the project is completed, we advance a certain percentage of the funds, sometimes 100% of the funds, and the municipalities actually manage their own projects. But we don't allocate just a percentage of the funds. It's project-based.
Yeah. And so I guess, does the MPO have authority over the county commission? If the MPO wants a project and the county doesn't, is the MPO allowed to spend the money or to dictate where the money is spent?
Greg, do you want, I mean, I'm not sure I'm following.
I can answer that question real easy. No. Because I think I know where you're asking. So basically, we make recommendations to county staff over what applications are coming in. The county takes Gretchen and her team, takes it to the oversight board. The oversight board says yes or no. It goes to the county commission, and then our role is very limited on that side. And,
It's more of a advising, a recommended.
it's a recommendation. It's unlike the Surface Transportation Community Block Grant dollars that all MPOs get that are urbanized. That money is directed by the MPO, and even though DOT likes to take it and do some stuff with it, it's still our money. So this is different. This is a different story. We basically are just ranking the minimum annual guarantee, right? Is that
Well,
the way you would say it?
I think, Mayor, that our county commission entered into a legal agreement that does bind them, but that was their choice. So they chose to be bound by the recommendations that the MPO sent over in 2020 for municipal projects, specifically to our municipal projects.
Okay.
So they sent over 110, and we have to fund the 97 that the oversight board deemed eligible, kind of in their exact ranked order. But again, that was our county commission's choice.
Okay.
But it's not cash on the MPO's side.
No,
Please do not get confused.
No, I understand the information. And then also, you didn't mention any of the opposition that you guys faced. Was there any, and how did you guys deal with that?
We were incredibly lucky.
Okay.
I mean, when I say lucky, I mean so lucky. We were the biggest in the nation from a dollar volume that year. And I can only speculate that the reason we didn't have organized opposition was because there just wasn't time. We really only had 4 months to put the educational and advocacy campaign to work. I think that was to our advantage. When I talk to other jurisdictions across the country, including Hillsborough County, my colleagues there, a lot of time when you have a 2 or 3 year endeavor, it does allow a lot more opportunity for organized opposition. We did have our local paper come out against it, but I mean, other than that, I mean, maybe I've blocked it out. But I don't recall a lot of opposition. I mean, or again, organized opposition.
There was a large frustration in the community that was built up over time that said we needed to do something about transportation, and they knew.
Hold on, they're coming.
Yeah, the opposition struck. There it is. The opposition, there was some opposition. I mean, we were seeing it in a lot of the feedback we were getting via our social media platforms, but it wasn't organized at the level that I had seen in the past. A lot of the opposition in the previous go rounds were people just pointing fingers at each other, cities to the county to themselves. It just, kind of just went out of control. But if you look at what happened, and Gretchen is correct, I mean, we were very fortunate, but the opposition that was there wasn't strong enough. And I don't even know if it was about time. In reality, it was just that we had done a lot of work up front. And that's the important part to take is you're talking to different levels of the community. And they all knew that something needed to get done. So this was that something. Now we just can't screw it up.
Thank you.
Obviously, the business community has to embrace it. And obviously the sale is that this is for economic development so that you can bring them in and they're not fighting and saying, we've already paid taxes. What are you coming back for more? Before I get to Andrew, I just want to let the representatives of Tri-Rail, Palm Tran, and Brightline know that you're going to be drawn into this if you'd like to be after this question. So if you have any questions or points that you want to make, I'll invite you to come up to the podium after Andrew speaks. Andrew?
Sure, thank you, Chair. To follow up on Mayor Grant's point, so you have half a cent going to the cities and they're prioritizing and programming that. And then the other half is that county amount, and then it's going to be approved by this independent oversight board, but the final approval is by the Board of County Commissioners. for the
So
projects?
it's a full penny for transportation. And the cities were invited to submit projects that were priorities for them into the original plan. But the amount that the cities receive is a minimum of 10% on an annual basis of projected revenues. And thus far, we've been funding them well above that. In our first year, it was almost 40%, but that was simply because we were looking at shovel-ready projects, things that were, again, low-hanging fruit and opportunities to ensure that these projects were getting out into the communities and actually making a difference. The oversight board's responsibility is to review every project, whether it's a municipal project or a county project, for eligibility under the statute. That was something that, again, the county commission delegated. That's their role, but they chose to delegate that role to the oversight board. Once the oversight board does that, then the county commission actually appropriates the dollars. And then the oversight board has ongoing programmatic and financial oversight of each project in the program on the whole. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and then the appropriations by state law, or is that also something that can be go into the agreement with the municipalities and everyone else?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Sure. So the appropriations by the county, that's a state requirement?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, is that something that can be written into the agreement if it was a different sort of, if they relinquished out to have the an independent board oversee that or not? Or
I think I can probably, Mr. Mayor, can probably answer that question. The statute is very clear that the county commission is in charge of this operation. It isn't the county and the MPO or the county and the municipalities. It's the county, specifically under the state statute. What they did in Broward and what the statute would allow is for interlocal agreements to be developed, which is what Broward did. They developed one interlocal agreement, as the slide presentation pointed out, with the municipalities about how the money might be allocated. But again, it was the county's decision to enter into that interlocal agreement. They entered into a second interlocal agreement, as the slide indicated, with the MPO, and the MPO's function was to review the various plans or projects in the overall plan. And they realized, of course, that this is covering a long period of time. They couldn't all be funded at one time. So the MPO was recommending which projects to move forward to. That went to an oversight board, which the statute doesn't necessarily require, but Brevard County, or Broward County rather, decided to have that. And then that group, which is a group of hopefully expert decision makers, makes a recommendation to the county commission. And I hate to say this, but I suspect that by the time it gets to the county commission, it's almost kind of a rubber stamp, because you've got so much review and so much research and so much study of which projects to fund now that are being recommended by the time it actually gets to the county commission. How am I doing?
You're doing pretty well.
Does anybody from our three public transportation companies want to come up and say anything? Ally? No? Commissioner? All right.
got one more if you want. Just one more.
One more?
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it. The last one is, it looks like you went to the voters with just the goals, really. You didn't have any specific detailed projects when it came to the actual referendum, correct? So nothing was really detailed on projects.
No, we had over 1,400 specific detailed projects when we went to the voters. There was a whole map of every one of the projects, both county and municipal. And in all of our educational materials, we made sure that it was clear that we were delivering a project-based plan. Those goals are just the overall program goals.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to truncate the break. We're a little behind, but I think we had some good conversation there, and we'll catch up with our next presentation. So we'll resume at 25 minutes to 3.
Check, check. 1, 2, 3.
All right, we're going to try and pull this back together. Can we get everybody back in the room? And otherwise, we're going to be here until 6.
No, we got parties to go
I know, we got a party.
to. Yeah, and I need to go home and change.
I'm not changing. This is it. Mr. Reinhardt, where are you? Let's get this back together.
I can't do it now.
All right, we're going to get back together here. And Mr. Reinhardt, would you please introduce our next speaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Forbes, get back on your bus.
All right, our next speaker is from Miami-Dade. He is Mr. Javier Betancourt. He's the director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. So he's going to be providing some overview of what they have been able to accomplish with their half-penny transportation surtax. I'll leave it to you.
Or not accomplish, as the case may be. So good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the TPA and others in attendance. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you today. My name is Javier Betancourt. I'm Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, the CITT. That is an entity of Miami-Dade County, but depending on who you ask and how you look at it, independent of. I'm going to be providing you with a brief history of the CITT. I've only been on the job 4 years, so I don't go back to 20 years to when this started. So some of the historical questions you're asking, I may not be able to answer, but there's someone in the room who may. And then we'll get into the actual half penny, what it's generated over time, what it's been used for, et cetera. So just a little bit about me before we start, so you can understand the perspective I bring. I'm an urban planner by trade, but one with a long-time passion for transportation. I started my career as a planner with the South Florida Regional Planning Council. And so while I work for Miami-Dade County and obviously prioritize Miami-Dade County's needs, I always think regionally. And I understand how improvements to transportation in Palm Beach County and Broward County ultimately impact and benefit the entire region. So I really think that transportation is a regional issue and we need to collaborate and support each other's efforts. So first, a little of the CITT. We were created as part of the original referendum for the half penny surtax in 2002. There had been number of prior trials for penny taxes. Those had failed. So in 2002, the thought was, well, let's go for a half penny and see if the voters go for that. And let's also promise a citizens independent transportation trust, which is actually embedded in the referendum language itself, to give the voters comfort that those dollars would not be misappropriated, and that there was a group of citizens charged with overseeing its use and the implementation of what came to be known as the People's Transportation Plan. So that is who we are. We are an independent entity comprised of volunteer citizens who serve on our trust, and we monitor, audit, oversee, and investigate the use of surtax funds and the implementation of the People's Transportation Plan. There was an enormous effort in 2002, and potentially going even prior to that into 2001, to educate the voters, to inform them not only of the needs, but of the potential projects that could come to fruition with this surtax. There were over 100 public meetings held, obviously collaboration and coordination with the cities, with the business community, with community leaders throughout the county. Like West Palm Beach, we have our share of millionaires and billionaires, one of whom had been a very prominent opponent of previous efforts. His name was Norman Brayman, and he has a number of dealerships throughout the region. And it was important that he not oppose this effort because he could bankroll its defeat. And through the efforts at the time, largely led by then Mayor Alex Pinellas out of his office, they at least got, I think, Mr. Brayman not to oppose it. I don't know if he fully supported it, but sometimes just getting someone to sit quietly, helps a tremendous amount. Clinton Forbes, who was a part of that effort, working out of the mayor's office to hold those community meetings, to develop a strategic plan, to oversee its passage. And ultimately, it succeeded with, I believe, also over 60% of the vote at the time. And again, if you have any kind of historical questions that date back to that time, Clinton might be in a better position to answer them than I am. So our trust is composed of 15 members, one appointed by each county commissioner, one by the League of Cities, and another by the mayor of Miami-Dade County. And again, they come from all walks of life. They don't get compensated. And we meet on a regular monthly basis, with the exception of this month, to look at projects, review them, and pass on a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. Our trust members, again, are volunteers, but they are supported by county employees who report to them. So I'm the executive director, and I have 8 employees under my purview. We all report to that oversight board. We do not report to the administration, i.e. the mayor, or the Board of County Commissioners. Okay, and our operating budget is about $3 million. We try to keep that at less than 1% of surtax revenues. We want, even though we can go up to 5% of surtax revenues for our expenses, we want the bulk of those funds to go to projects. And so we try to run a tight ship. Our guiding documents, like Broward and potentially like you, were guided by Florida statutes, although we, I think, fall under different provision than the provision that applies to this county. The county also passed a couple of ordinances, one governing the use of funds, one governing our operations as an oversight board. We have our own bylaws. And then the projects are all encompassed in what we call the original People's Transportation Plan. That was a list of promises that were made to the voters prior to its passage. And then a 5-year implementation plan. So in order to get surtax funds, you have to be in this plan first. Like every good government agency, we have a 5-year plan, right? I know you're no different. So we have 3 bites at the apple at projects that come to us from the county, and really only 1 bite for municipal projects. And I'll get into the differences in a bit. For the county, number 1, they have to bring the projects to us as a concept to be included in this book, much like the LRTP, the TIP. Once this is approved by the Board of County Commissioners and the county is ready to proceed with a project, they bring it back to us as a contract, right? With exact dollar amounts, timeframes, et cetera. We review those as well, make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and they approve or deny it. Then on the back end, once the project has been implemented, we audit the county and the municipalities on a regular basis to ensure that the funds were spent appropriately. It's important to note that while we only make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, it is a strong recommendation. County commissioners can only override our recommendation with a 2/3 vote. And getting 2/3 of county commissioners in Miami-Dade County to agree to something is not always easy. With the municipal portion, and if I could backtrack here, 20% of our funds go to municipalities on a pro rata basis. So the city of Miami, which has by far the largest population of any city in the county, gets the bulk of those, I think 20 million a year. And then the cities have to use 20% of their funds for transit. The other 80% they can use towards other transportation improvements, roadways, signage, et cetera. A minimum of 20% for transit. They can use all of it for transit if they so wish. And increasingly, we find that cities are using greater percentages of their funds for transit because that's what the residents are demanding. There are also only so many times you can widen or repave a roadway in Miami-Dade County. You know, we're pretty congested, we're built out. We're not building a whole lot of new roadways in urban centers. So really, transit is our present and increasingly our future. One of the most important functions that we play is to audit both the county and all the municipalities on a semi-regular basis. Those who receive the most or have had some problems in the past, we audit every year, i.e. City of Miami. Those that are smaller receive a smaller percentage of funds or have done pretty well over these past 20 so years. We audit every 3 years, and then others are somewhere in between. So we're constantly auditing both the cities and the county to ensure that they use those funds appropriately. When we find that a city has not used the funds appropriately, we will withhold funds until they come into compliance. Or if it's something, more akin to a felony than a misdemeanor, we will actually recapture the funds and they lose it altogether. We do not have that power with the county, and we only have that power with the cities because the county has provided us with that authority. We also conduct a number of strategic planning and analyses efforts, anywhere from looking at value capture districts and special assessment districts for each of the corridors. Most recently, we asked our strategic consultants to look at the federal infrastructure bill and to do a deep dive into the amounts that we may be able to receive here in Miami-Dade County, which are substantially enhanced as a result of the bill. As you look at the reasons to enact a penny sales tax here in West Palm Beach, that is one of the reasons to do so. There is a lot more federal money on the table. Increasingly, you need that local match to attract those dollars. Those of us with a local match are at a competitive advantage to attract those dollars. So again, if I were just thinking about Miami-Dade County, I would be telling you not to go for a penny or half penny, because that would be more competition for us. But again, I believe that we're all in this together, and we all need to sink or swim together. So hopefully more swimming than sinking. All right, let's talk about the money. It's only a half penny, not a full penny, but we're a large county, a lot of economic activity. So that little half penny has generated a lot of money over the years. We're nearing $4 billion in revenue over the 18 years that this has been collected. But over 2/3 of that has gone to transit, albeit not for transit expansion necessarily, which is what people were expecting. A lot of it has gone to supporting existing operations, maintenance, and infrastructure renewal. A quarter of it has gone, again, to the municipalities. I said it was 20% that went to cities, but we since passage of the tax, 3 new cities were incorporated, and so that percentage has grown. Only 8% has gone to public works for roadway and traffic signals and those types of projects. The public believes that most of the money has been used for roadways at the expense of transit, but that's only because they see the evidence in new roadways and widenings, and they haven't seen that evidence with respect to transit. But in fact, most of the money has gone to transit. We have a small capital expansion reserve fund, which we're using to enhance transit. And then finally, just 1% has gone to us for administration over the years. more or less the same information, kind of shown to you on an annual basis. The biggest chunk of our funds is going to debt service at the moment to pay for the expansion of Metro Rail to the airport, which was achieved a number of years ago. Also the purchase of new Metro Rail trains, which were desperately needed, and some other capital investments. The next largest chunk of change is going to the cities, then MDT operating. Again, that's the support for ongoing operations and maintenance, then public works, then capital reserve fund, and then ourselves. So let's talk about the plan. So a number of promises were made in 2002. This list of projects was generated via a combination of methods, right? It was driven by technical analysis. Projects were pulled from the LRTP and the TIP. The department submitted items. And then, as I said, there were over 100 community meetings. Community members kind of expressed the projects that they thought were important. Cities submitted projects. So after all of that effort, we ended up with what was called the People's Transportation Plan. That was attached as an exhibit to the ordinance approving the surtax referendum, which everyone still refers to as Exhibit 1. So if you ever hear of Exhibit 1, it's the list of original projects. And it wasn't just transit, right? There were promises to expand bus service by 63%. There were promises to expand Metro Rail along 6 to 8 different corridors to every corner of the county. There were promises to expand and enhance roadways and institute advanced traffic management systems. There was a promise to make all transit fare-free for seniors. Prior to then, it was fare-free for seniors under a certain income. One of the key promises, and I think the reason it passed, frankly, was we promised to seniors fare-free transit regardless of income. Fare-free Metro Mover, if you know of the People Mover system in downtown Miami, which was automated before automated was cool. The key promise was to make that free. And then there are a number of smaller, what I would call neighborhood improvement program type projects, which are essentially, I don't want to call them, let's not use that word. Every commissioner is allotted an amount to distribute towards projects within their districts as they see fit. And that is the neighborhood improvement program. So that was about 100 million that was given to each of the 13 commissioners, according to a complex formula. It wasn't actually equally divided. Okay. And then very importantly, there was a maintenance of effort commitment. There was fear, and I think a reasonable fear, that should this surtax pass, that the county would simply, take the funds that they were currently giving the transit and do a bait and switch, much like the fabled lottery bait and switch at the state level. So there was a requirement written into the ordinance to require that the county continue to budget the transit department at the same level it had in 2002. That was later changed in subsequent years to add a 5%, 3 to 5% increase. So not only do they have to maintain the same budget levels as 2002, they have to do that plus 3 to 5% every year. I want to say it's 5%. Obviously to adjust for inflation, right? So progress to date. Well, Golden Passport was enacted immediately and very successful and very popular. We then followed that up with a Patriot Passport. So that's fare-free transit for all veterans. That one is subject to income limitations. We did expand Metro Rail to the airport. It's probably our greatest achievement. We did make Metro Mover fare-free. We also replaced all the Metro Mover cars, which were very much outdated. We have now also replaced all the Metro Rail cars. We did provide and continue to provide the cities with their 20+%. And those cities have done great things with their share of the surtax dollars, which I'll go into in a second. We have instituted advanced management traffic signals and systems to make our roadways more efficient. We have completed 3/4 of the promised roadway projects, and we're in the process of completely upgrading our bus system as well, largely using CNG and electric buses to be environmentally friendly. And let me just pause there for a second. When I say we, I just want to make it clear, we're an oversight board. We have a TPO, much like the TPA, that does the planning and prioritizes the funding. And then the Department of Transportation and Public Works for Miami-Dade County is the agency charged with building and ultimately operating the system. Those colleagues of mine aren't here today, so I may not be able to answer some of those more technical questions, but that's why Clinton stayed behind. So we talked about the municipal program, and this is clearly one of those promises that was fulfilled. We have provided them with the funds, and they have done good things with them. We have 34 municipalities in Miami-Dade County. 31 of them have used their funds to enact some sort of transit system, whether it be a fixed route circulator, like a trolley, much like the cute little trolleys you have here, or increasingly on-demand service. So many of our cities are opting to partner with a group called Freebie, for instance, that you can see the little golf carts they run there on the bottom. And that is a point-to-point service, much like Uber or Lyft. And 95% of those are fare free. There are a couple of cities that have chosen to charge their customers, but most do not. And it's been wildly successful. Ridership has increased year over year, and it's carrying now over 14 million passengers per year, the pandemic notwithstanding. Another promise fulfilled, again, was the promise of new, expanded, enhanced roadways. 74% of those have been completed, and most of the others are in some state of progress. And now we could talk about the unfulfilled promises, or what some would call broken promises. One of the key promises of the PTP was enhanced bus service. Really, while Metro Rail and Metro Mover are sexy, the bulk of the ridership is on our bus system. And many of those community meetings, people demanded better bus service, right? Improved frequency, better routes, better service. And as you can see, the goal in the green was to get to 44 million revenue miles. We were in 2002 when the referendum was passed at 26. You could see year after year following 2002 that we started to make progress towards that 44 up until about 2006. After that, and due to a number of things that I won't get into, but certainly the recession contributed greatly to that number then coming back down. Today in 2019, we are practically at the same level of service that we were in 2002. So nowhere near the increase that was promised. But the one everyone remembers and the one everyone fixates on is Metro Rail. So here you see the Metro Rail, and I believe everyone here knows what the Metro Rail is, right? It's heavy rail, much like Atlanta or Chicago or any of those places. It's a legacy system, and here was the system in 2002. Here's what was promised. We were going to hit every corner of the county along all these major corridors. And ultimately, nearly 20 years later, the only thing we really achieved was this one expansion to the airport. So clearly, an unfulfilled promise. However, today we are embarking on something called the SMART Plan, which essentially is the same plan as the People's Transportation Plan in 2002. It's been rebranded, re-engineered, but you'll see some great similarities between the quarters of the SMART Plan and the original People's Transportation Plan. And with that, I'm going to play a short video produced by our TPO that provides you with an overview of the SMART Plan. If we can have that played.
One of the important roles that the TPO has is to form transportation policies and create partnerships that help
turn up the volume.
Our transportation goals.
In 2016, the Miami-Dade TPO Governing Board established rapid transit as the highest priority for the county. The TPO Board unanimously adopted the 6-corridor SMART Plan and funded the required environmental studies. Since then, several key project milestones have been accomplished. This also includes a 90-mile Bus Express Rapid Transit, or BERT, network. As a result, the Northwest Miami-Dade Express BERT line began service from the Miami Gardens Drive Park and Ride after its groundbreaking ceremony. The SMART Plan is also commonly referred to as the SMART Region, connecting Southeast Florida from Monroe to Palm Beach counties. The TPO Board approved the South and North corridors to advance to Priority 1, followed by a series of actions to accelerate these projects. For the South Dade Transitway Corridor, the TPO Board adopted Bus Rapid Transit as the locally preferred alternative, which will operate from the Dadeland South Metro Rail Station to Florida City. The county received 2 federal funding grants to advance this project as a gold standard bus rapid transit facility. For the North Corridor, Miami-Dade is currently advancing a request for proposal for the design, construction, finance, operation, and maintenance service for an elevated fixed guideway transit system. This corridor has been endorsed as a strategic intermodal facility by the Southeast Florida Transportation Council, as well as the Miami-Dade and Broward MPOs, representing support for the future economic growth of the region. For the Beach Corridor, the TPO Board adopted the locally preferred alternative in 3 sections. First, elevated rubber tire technology along the MacArthur Causeway. Second, dedicated transit lanes along Washington Avenue. And third, extending Metromover north to the Design District. For the Smart Region Northeast Corridor, Miami-Dade County started discussing steps necessary to implement the commuter rail service along this Smart Plan corridor. The West Aventura Station was the first to break ground. For the East-West Corridor, the TPO Board adopted Bus Rapid Transit as the locally preferred alternative from the Tamiami Station Park and Ride, with express service to the Miami Intermodal Center and downtown Miami. One of the new express bus services was started along State Road 836 from the Dolphin Station Park and Ride to downtown Miami. For the Kendall Corridor, the environmental phase is currently underway from the Dadeland North Metro Rail Station to Chrome Avenue. The TPO Board also adopted a Smart Plan demonstration program focused on advancing first and last mile connections and new technology options for the region. Between 2018 and 2020, 37 demonstration projects were approved in coordination with the Florida Department of Transportation, Miami-Dade County, the Transportation Trust, and municipal partners, providing new mobility options countywide. As part of a comprehensive multimodal approach, the TPO Board adopted the Smart Trails program, providing key pedestrian and bicycle connections to the rapid transit corridors. The success of the Smart Plan has been based on strong regional collaboration, and as the plan continues to advance, coordination at the federal, state, regional, and local level will continue to be essential.
And I have to say the TPO has been an enormous supporter
One of the
of our
important-
efforts. And really the TPO, DTPW, the CITT, even FDOT, we all work very well together in promoting the People's Transportation Plan and the Smart Plan. That hasn't always been the case, right? And the past years, there's been a lot of conflict, a lot of parochial interests that have intervened and kept us from moving forward. Everyone seems to be on the same page. And so we need to strike while the iron is hot. So just to reemphasize this, the Smart Plan really is the core of what we're all trying to achieve now using the remaining Surtax dollars. And when I say remaining, by the way, ours goes on in perpetuity. We're not subject to the 30-year, what's the word I'm looking for? Sunset provision, exactly. That was something that was put in place, after our tax was passed, thankfully. So as long as the voters don't turn around and do something foolish and get rid of the tax, it should go on forever. So again, 6 rapid transit corridors. All of them are in some stage of either development or, in the case of the South Dade Transitway, under actual construction. And then the one that kind of gets lost is this Bus Express Rapid Transit Corridor, but it's something you may want to consider here in Palm Beach County. It's using your existing highway system essentially to connect people from where they live to where they work along those highways, either in dedicated lanes, if possible, along the express lanes, much like what we currently have on 995, or in the case of 836, we've now put in lanes in the shoulders, right? So as traffic begins to back up, the buses are able to get into the shoulders of those expressways and bypass traffic. Okay. And just a quick little deep dive into each one again. South Dade, very exciting to see that now under construction. That is bus rapid transit, not Metro Rail. Many people in that community were disappointed. They felt they were promised Metro Rail. But it's going to provide much of the same service at a fraction of the cost and completed in a fraction of the time. I have become a big believer in bus rapid transit. It's something that people should really be open-minded to. Metro Rail is extraordinarily expensive. It takes forever to build, takes forever to get federal funding for. And that federal funding is essential if you're going to build something that expensive. So really take a strong look at BRT. 27th Avenue, the North Corridor, that will actually help to connect us to Broward County. And that is the one corridor that might actually be Metro Rail, potentially monorail, some kind of elevated rail. There are some social equity issues that go back decades along that corridor. Many promises were made to that community that have been broken multiple times, and we are determined not to make that same mistake today. Northeast Corridor, something that I know is near and dear to all of our hearts. This is at least what used to be called the Tri-Rail Coastal Link, and it may still be up here. In Miami, we call it the Northeast Corridor. And this is likely going to be some kind of partnership with Brightline and Tri-Rail to run commuter rail service along that corridor, in addition to what Brightline already does. The Beach Corridor, this is a bit of a platypus. It's going to be monorail, most likely between downtown and Miami Beach. Once you get to the beach, it'll be some kind of dedicated bus along a dedicated lane to get to the north towards the convention center. And on the mainland, again, an expansion of Metro Mover towards the Design District, Wynwood, which have become very popular places. East-West Corridor, this is going to run along State Road 836, the Dolphin Expressway, one of our busiest highways. It's going to be bus rapid transit. Kendall Corridor is the one I call the orphan of the SMART plan. The community is divided on what to do, doesn't have a political champion. I think you all know that for something to succeed of that magnitude, you really need a strong political champion at the county commission or at the TPO, and it just doesn't have it. At best, it might be some kind of BRT, but not in exclusive lanes, which at that point is really not BRT at all. So funding, right? You have to pay for all this. Initially in 2002, the plan was we're going to have a local match. We're going to attract federal dollars. We're going to attract state dollars. That'll be enough to pay for Metro Rail along all those corridors. Well, clearly, that's not the case. And one of the reasons why we haven't been able to move forward, right? That formula was never enough to build out the People's Transportation Plan. So today we've learned we have to rely on what we call a funding lasagna. And I think that was a term that, what was his name? Philip from Denver. What was his last name? You forget. Okay. Denver did this actually very successfully. And we went up and we did a fly into Denver, something I would recommend, and took a look at how they succeeded where we had failed. And what they did was they looked at additional funding sources, right? They knew they couldn't rely simply on federal and state. And so they looked at special assessment districts, at TIF districts, at local option gas tax, you name it. Well, we're trying to kind of put this puzzle together. We have our half penny. And again, that is essential. If you don't have a half penny really, or a penny, you're really not in the game. The TPO was able to, and don't ask me about this, I know you want to, but they were able to appropriate some dollars that they had some control over towards the SMART plan. We did implement the TIF district along the entire SMART plan, right? So this is key. So as property values increase along each of those proposed corridors, that increase in taxes is going to be plugged right back in to the SMART plan to help pay for that infrastructure. And that as infrastructure goes in, it'll increase value some more, and it just has this lovely symbiotic relationship. We have yet to implement or even really think about special assessment districts, which, as you know, is essentially an additional tax on the properties aligning a corridor. I think that's a mistake. I keep encouraging our officials to look at special assessment districts, excuse me. But obviously, you know, the politics of that are difficult. And then state federal grants, right? That is still part of the funding mix. And I'm just thrilled that the federal government actually achieved something and passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is going to increase grant opportunities for all of us. But we're leaving all this other stuff on the table and just things for you to consider as you move forward. Right. Oh, and I'm sorry, public-private partnerships, right? And Brightline is probably the best example of that. You know, the private sector is often able to do things that either we're not able to do or not able to do as quickly, right? So where you have those opportunities to partner with the private sector, you should explore those. And last slide, I told you I wouldn't take anywhere near an hour. Additional areas of focus for us, first, last mile solutions. I commute to work by bike, or at least I used to before I started working remotely. Our bike ped network in Miami-Dade County is wholly inadequate. I think we could all say that throughout the region. That is key, not only to keep cyclists and pedestrians safe and to get them to where they want to go, but also to support transit, right? That ultimately that first last mile connection to that transit stop, that transit station is what keeps a lot of people from using that system or that service. Enhancing county municipal connectivity. We don't have a transit system in Miami-Dade County. We have 32 county transit systems. We have Miami-Dade Transit, we have Tri-Rail, and then we have 30 odd municipalities, each running their own little trolley on-demand service. And they're not well connected. They're not well integrated. So that's one of the things that we've been trying to encourage is better integration of those systems. So that if you're a user and you want to get from point A to point B, you don't care who's running the system, right? You should be able to go to one app and get from one place to another seamlessly. And that doesn't happen today. Improving the customer experience. We have to compete with the convenience, the safety of an automobile. And so anything we can do to improve the customer experience, to attract more riders to transit is a good thing. That means maintaining the system in a state of good repair. It means keeping it clean. And particularly now in a post-pandemic world, people are looking for these things to look clean and to be clean. And then performance, are the headways adequate? Is it getting me to where I want to go in a timely manner, et cetera? And to the point on maintenance, by the way, I think the initial, to the extent that we haven't kept our promises, particularly on expanding Metro Rail, it's because people forgot about operations, maintenance, and infrastructure renewal. There was a plan laid out that showed that a half penny would be enough to expand transit, but they didn't count on the fact that we would need to spend some of that money on upgrading the existing system. And so we went out for a federal grant for the North Corridor, and all the numbers, added up. And the feds essentially said, you can't maintain what you have. And if you can't maintain and upgrade your existing system over these next 30, 40 years, we're not going to give you additional funds for a new corridor. And so it became very clear, readily apparent, very early on, that we needed to take some of those funds and really shore up the existing system. And that was one of the key lessons that hopefully Broward learned from us, and hopefully you will as well. And finally, community engagement. We had not done a good job over these past couple of decades of communicating to the public on what had been accomplished with their half penny. And so just as recently as the last election, there were a lot of calls in the community to get rid of the half penny. They said it's been wasted. It's been spent on other things other than transportation. Nothing's been done with it. So we've had to put some dollars and a great deal of effort into communicating better with our residents to ensure them that, in fact, the money has been spent appropriately, albeit we've had to go back and fix the existing system. And we actually went back. It was interesting that you've gotten away from the penny logo. We had a penny logo. We got rid of it. We've gone back to it because I think people started to lose that association between the service, the new Metro Rail cars, the new buses, and the half penny. So the half penny makes it very clear this was paid for with your half penny. And that way they see, with their own eyes, where that money has gone. So with that, I really just wanted to leave as much time as possible for questions that Clinton can answer, and then we can move on. Thank you.
I'm going to start off with a question. When Broward made its presentation, I didn't see such a large proportion of the money going for debt service. Is that something that you're not doing debt service? So who is on the hook for the debt service? Is that a county obligation? Are these revenue bonds? How is that working?
It's county and it's revenue bonds based, it's paid for with the half penny, 100%.
So the decision was made early on to jumpstart the program by
Yes.
going out and basically borrowing against the future revenue off the.
That's exactly it. Now, and remember, ours goes on in perpetuity, so it doesn't tie us down forever. And it's really been fairly limited, frankly. A lot of this has been paid for with cash. I think the two major things that we're paying for with debt service is the expansion to the airport, which was $500 million project. And the replacement of the Metro Rail vehicles, which was the next largest purchase at, I don't know, 350, 400 million. So those were, I think, the two major investments that debt service is paying for.
And you're saying you don't have a sunset, but a new program today would need to have the 30-year sunset?
I believe so.
I'm getting a shake head. from
Yes,
Paul.
I believe you are subject to that. Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, other questions?
Thank you so much. So can you tell me about your BRT ridership population? So are you looking at folks that are going from home to work? Or are you looking at people who are utilizing it for first mile, last mile, and utilizing other transportation?
I guess it depends on the corridor. The one that's under construction right now, again, the current ridership is zero, hasn't been implemented.
Ah.
I'm really bad with numbers and I didn't bring them with me. So I couldn't tell you what the exact ridership projection is for the South Corridor. What I can tell you is that it was competitive with Metro Rail at 1/10 of the cost. Okay, so Metro Rail would have been better, right? You have more capacity. People like Metro Rail, right? It's kind of cool. Many people will take a train that will never get on a bus.
Right.
So the idea is make the BRT as train-like as possible. That means, frequency. That means designing it in a way that's appealing to people. That means putting it in an exclusive lane so it's not competing with traffic. It means level boarding like you would on a train. It means paying for that fare, if there is a fare, prior to getting on the bus so that everything is expedited. And most importantly, I think for the South Corridor in particular, it means crossing gates, much like Brightline has. So at those intersections, we're actually going to have crossing gates. So that bus doesn't have to ever stop at an intersection. It just keeps going.
Can you tell
And it
me
is
more?
largely going to be taking residents who live in South Dade,
Yep.
which is the fastest growing area of our county, to major employment centers such as downtown Miami. It will go all the way from Homestead to Dadeland Station, which is where the Metro Rail begins. They'll do a seamless transfer. So we're going to try and make that transfer as seamless as possible. Every transfer you introduce it into a system kills a certain percentage of ridership. We know that. So that is the one downside I would say of going with BRT versus Metro Rail is it's not a one-seat ride. But frankly, there aren't many systems in the world where you can expect that length of a journey, on a one-seat ride. You typically have to transfer somewhere. So yeah, it's getting people where they live to where they work in downtown, Coral Gables, other major employment centers.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the dedicated lane and the process? for that?
So we cheated a little because this particular corridor already had a dedicated lane, right? It was never BRT.
Never mind. Okay. You're good.
Yeah, it was,
Changes it.
it was, I think, the old FEC line. And at some point in the past, they converted that into dedicated bus lanes, but they were regular buses and have been regular buses. They looked like them, they behaved like them. And so all they're doing is upgrading that now to a true BRT system, but those lanes were already dedicated.
Oh, cool.
Now, in the future, for those additional BRT corridors, we are going to have to either take lanes away from existing streets, or in the case of the highway, for instance, they're running them on the shoulders, as I said. The reason that the Kendall BRT is not likely to happen is because if you've ever been on Kendall Drive in Miami-Dade, the thought of losing a lane there is apocalyptic. I mean, it's just not going to happen. They would never agree to that. And that's the only way you can make it work.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's the curiosity is the dedicated lane for them. So come back and tell us about it when you do that for the
Yes.
areas that don't have it for the rail already, please. That'd be
Happy,
intriguing.
happy to.
Thank you.
Paul?
You had, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You had mentioned maintenance of effort, which was provided in the initial documents for the Surtax. To your knowledge, has the maintenance of effort provisions ever been violated? And as a follow-up to that, who has the power to enforce maintenance of effort? Because I suspect that if Palm Beach County decides to go forward with this, that may be an important consideration for them.
I would agree. We have the power to investigate it. We do, as a matter of our regular auditing, we do look to make sure that the maintenance of effort has been achieved. It has never been violated. Well, I would say is on one or two occasions, the county asked us essentially if they could, in tough budget years, and I want to say this happened during the recession, to waive it for that year and then be repaid in subsequent years. Essentially another version of a loan. So it's not so much that it's been violated, but we have worked with the county on ways around it, at least on a temporary basis when necessary. But we make sure that the municipalities in the county maintain that MOE every year. And in a couple of cases, they've tried to get away from it, and that's when we withhold funds until they come into compliance.
One of the things that concerns me is the funding lasagna, because if we are trying to make a case with the stakeholders to give us the extra penny, and then all of a sudden they say, well, we're already paying you gas taxes, we're already giving you property taxes, and what's to say you're not just, money's fungible. So how are you able to, and I know you're not going back to the voters now that you've created this funding scheme, I won't say, not scheme in the negative, but that this is the way that you've laddered the funding. But if that was understood when people were being asked to approve it, I'm wondering whether you would have been successful.
No, and it's been a very difficult conversation, frankly, in the county these past few years. We've essentially had to admit that not that we screwed up, but that we overpromised what was possible with that half penny. And that really we need another half penny, but we're not about to go and ask you for it because we know that we need to prove that we can do what was promised before we can ask you for more. And that we would have to be creative at finding other funding sources. So that conversation has happened, in various forums at various times with the community at large. And we had a few, I would say, champions on the county commission who were really willing and able to lead the charge on particularly the TIF district, for instance, which was not an easy sell. But it took political courage to go and say, hey, this is the only way this thing is going to work, is if we find another funding source. Otherwise, it's either not going to happen, or we need to go out for another half penny that is clearly not going to pass in this environment.
So you said that there was a potential, it looked like that there could have been a citizens referendum to eliminate the half penny.
There was some talk of it, right? I think people floated that out there. I don't know that it ever had any real legs, but there's always the potential.
How would you have covered the debt service if all of a sudden the half penny disappeared?
Well, clearly that would be one of the arguments against the referendum, right? Okay, you might save the half penny. Now we're going to have to raise your millage by X amount to cover that debt service. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Commissioner Marino, you are recognized.
Thank you. I apologize for being late. I had an agenda review for tomorrow's meeting, but just remind me, please, what is your population and what are the yearly dollars you receive from this half penny?
Oh gosh, what is our population these days? It's nearing 4 million, I believe. No, 2.4 is per hour.
Okay.
Isn't it? Where are you at?
No, Miami-Dade.
I must be thinking, I always think regionally. So I think 4 million is the whole region.
We're
So
1 point, we're.
thank you.
1.9.
2.5 million. We're generating 300 million, plus or minus a million here and there.
And 1% of that is going to your budget, correct?
1% to cover our administrative costs for oversight.
Okay.
And then about 23% to the cities, and the rest goes to the county.
I'm just making sure the notes I took were accurate. Sometimes you're writing so quickly, you don't know what you're writing. So you said that only 20% of your budget is going to transit right now?
No, 60-something% of that 300 million is going to transit in one way or shape or form. 20% is going, well, technically 23% is going to cities. The cities have to use a minimum of 20% of their funds for transit. But again, many are using much greater numbers than that.
Okay. And how many, I wrote down here old projects versus new projects, which I think, we were touching on because of the debt service. So how many other old projects are you paying for now other than just the metro?
So in our 5-year plan, we came to a compromise with the department a few years ago. So we realized that we can't build a new second story on a house when, the first floor is crumbling, right? We need to put some money into shoring up the existing system. because ultimately the new system is going to be integrated into the existing system. But we didn't want all the money going there. So we came to a compromise where $12.5 million a year is set aside for infrastructure renewal program type of projects. So, that's upgrading essentially the existing system. In addition to that, there has been an operating subsidy that has been going to the county. It was as high as 100 million just a few years ago. It's now down to 30. In the next few years, we believe that'll be down to 0. I'd like to say it's because the county is being nice and not taking more money than they should, but really it's as a result of all these new projects. So as debt service commitments rise, there simply isn't enough money left over to give them a subsidy for their operations.
Thank you.
You heard the question I gave Broward as far as advocacy versus education. I know you said that you're not really versed in prehistoric before 2002, but can you enlighten us how that was handled? Was there a central agency that was responsible for the advocacy? Was there a political action committee? I mean, how was that handled?
So my understanding, and I'm going to ask Clinton to come up here and confirm, because I know he was a big part of it, is that it was essentially run out of the mayor's office. At the time, we did not have a strong mayor. We had a mayor and we had a county manager. So my understanding is the operation was really run out of the mayor's office. They pulled people in from other departments to work on this initiative, essentially full time. And it was largely done in-house, although I'm sure in close collaboration and coordination with, other institutions such as chambers of commerce in the cities. I don't believe there was a PAC created, but I could be wrong. And frankly, I don't know that in Miami-Dade County, we distinguish between education and advocacy quite as much as you do here. So I think they were pretty openly advocating for passage of this.
I bet you don't have an inspector general in Miami.
We do actually,
Do you?
but
okay,
we were educating very effectively to achieve our ends, I guess. Just advocacy.
Okay,
But
any questions?
Clinton, was there? Do you know of anything else that? I don't recall any kind of political action committee.
Mr. Forbes, you
Yes.
are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And 20 years ago, there was education, but the committee really put its toe on the line when, separating advocacy from education. But it was from the attorney's office to administration, it was heavy communication that it had to be an educational campaign. But again, the lines were a little blurry when you actually went out and spoke to the community. But as Javier mentioned and Broward mentioned, the champion was so critically important. And the mayor at that time, Alex Pinellas, said, "I'm going to champion this." And what he did, which I thought was also a part of the success, he took 2 members of the business community and said that you are co-chairs of this initiative. So it wasn't just all county, it was also the business community partnering with county government to get this across the line.
Clinton, was this the first time they tried to get a surtax passed, or was this?
No, it had actually failed over the previous 20 years about 6 or 7 times by a 2-to-1 margin. Yeah. And with the change in approach, and of course going from a full cent to a half-cent proposal, and as you mentioned earlier, the pain point, of the folks in Miami-Dade and Broward, that they reached a certain pain point to say we have to do something, and the timing is so critically important, and it passed by a 2-to-1 margin in 2002.
Thank you. I appreciate the historical background.
You're welcome.
Anybody else from the board who wants to? Okay, we have one last question and we'll move on to our next, right on time.
Well done. So here we are. So I don't know how much you guys know about what we're trying to accomplish here in Palm Beach County in the future with mobility and with transportation, and to find a way to find solutions. So we've listened to what you've done. Thank you so much. So without, I don't know how much you know about what we're trying to accomplish or considering doing. So you have a moment right now to tell us, aside from what you did, what you might think we should consider, because we're in a different situation than you are, because this is now and yours is nice and pocketed and in perpetuity. So it's a little bit different, but I'm sure we got a lot of takeaways. So if I'm just an open question, if there's anything in specific that you see that we need to keep our eyes out on as a county and municipalities working with our TPA to accomplish this together.
Okay, I think we have finished that topic and we're ready to move on.
Did you want an answer to that, or was that?
Oh, no, I'm just going to let my colleagues here on both sides of me have a different view of mobility than me, but we'll let you have an answer.
Well, and actually, mobility is changing at a rapid pace, right? So that's one of the things you have to consider much more so than we did at the time. I don't think we were thinking of driverless cars and ride share and all this, big data. So it's actually a much more complex environment that you're in, which lends itself to greater flexibility, right? I think you want to remain flexible, not overly promise specific projects that may be, antiquated within, by the time you pass your tax, and get your ducks in a row, that project may no longer make the most sense because technology has moved so quickly. So I would encourage you to remain as flexible as possible and be upfront with the voters about that. It's like, listen, we need to be flexible because things are changing rapidly. Definitely don't overpromise, right? That might help you pass the tax, but it's going to give you 20 years of headaches afterwards. That's exactly it. So those are my two. And the third takeaway is don't forget about operations, maintenance, infrastructure renewal. Obviously what sells is the new stuff, but if you don't maintain what you have in a state of good repair, you can't build the new stuff. It all has to move forward together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Betancourt. And you brought it back. Oh, you have some more.
If I could, I'd love to know what it is that you are trying to accomplish. I think it would be helpful for us to understand what the vision is before we gave you a recommendation.
Well, it sounds like with the assistance of the TPA, the county and municipalities working together, we're considering putting something on the ballot in 2024 when the current penny sales tax will sunset. So it'd be a continuation of a current tax is how it's considered.
Yeah, we have 1 penny IST right now. So and it's going to sunset at a given level of revenue. So
Right. So I'm familiar with your infrastructure, but the transportation is so different in the way that it's structured and what it can be used for. And I had been advised that there may be some interest in maintaining an infrastructure sales tax past 2024 to do additional things. So if that is the case, then I think my recommendation would be that you look at what some of the lessons learned from Broward when we did the 50-50, half for infrastructure, half for transit. I know Greg did a lot of focus groups, but we did too. And so just, having an opportunity to sit with us and understand what worked and what didn't, if that is the road that you all decide to go down.
thank you for that input. Greg, did you want to?
Yeah, just since I grew up here and I have family still in Palm Beach County, it's an interesting dynamic because your Boca Raton area is different than your West Palm Beach, different from Palm Beach Gardens in the north into Jupiter. I wouldn't get married to any one particular project or plan. I think that's what Javi was kind of giving you the indication. And that's the thing that I think is the secret to the success in Broward is we didn't actually marry ourselves to one particular thing. It was a multi-dimensional, and it actually, the voters didn't, we were married to a light rail system, and that got divorced right when we were ready to break ground for something. And that was probably the best thing that happened. Because we would have been married to a technology that might not necessarily have been useful long-term. So you might want to look at your solutions differently. I know you have a 561 plan that you have, and I referenced our 100-year vision for a reason. When you're communicating with the public, say this is something that you want to get to, but you're not going to get together into that 30-year, 20-year, whatever the horizon is. It's a 100-year thing. So that way, that under promise, over deliver is there, but they know that you're working towards something. You know, my relatives in Boca Raton look at things and taxes one way, and my relatives in Palm Beach Gardens were Commissioner Marino, you know, congratulations. I didn't get to tell you that before, you know, going to the county. But, you know, that is actually one of those things that you would probably need to look at. So it's that one size in the Glades, you have a whole nother area that you have a whole different lifestyle. So, you know, recognizing that it's not going to all be the same everywhere is probably the best thing for you. That's my recommendation to you.
Without litigating the issue, obviously, we understand that there are all sorts of different needs. Some of those needs are being taken care of by impact fees, and some of them can't be, and we have to figure out that source of funding that's going to take care of mobility, and that'll be litigated in another forum. Commissioner Marino?
Thank you, Mayor. I think what we did with the IST was that each municipality in the county had come up with a wish list and put a dollar amount to that wish list. And as the dollars came in, we spent them. City of Palm Beach Gardens, we actually bonded out $30 million so that we could do all of our projects at once for what was on our wish list, knowing that that was going to be the amount of money that we were going to take in. And I believe the county and the municipalities will do the same thing going forward with this project, have projects that we are going to want to come to fruition. And in talking with our county administrator, I think one of the goals would be that this would actually replace our impact fees. So that might be, you know, that might be one of the goals for the county, is that it would in fact replace impact fees. But we have a bunch of stakeholders like you all do with our chambers, our environmental groups, our business development board, and our economic council. And I probably left out a half a dozen other stakeholders, but I'm sure that that will happen. And it'll be our duty to educate, not advocate, which is what we're allowed to do here, on the importance of why, or the reasoning that we're trying to do something like this. So I look forward to this happening in the future, and it would be, once the IST goes away, this would be not for infrastructure, but for mobility or transportation, whichever word you want to use. All right, yours, Mayor.
Thank you. I think we're done with this subject. I think it's time for the 15-minute roadmap to the surtax. Mr. Reinhardt?
And thank you, but I apologize, I have to leave. So if you have any further questions for me, please feel free to reach out.
We do appreciate you
Mr.
taking the
Reinhardt
time
has
to
my
come on
contact
up here
information.
and join us.
I have to catch a train, so
Luck.
I'm out too.
Well, thank you both to Greg and Javier for participating today. They provided a lot of really great information to this group. And yes, I have their contacts. If you want to reach out to them, I'm happy to share that with you. But yes, thank you for all attending today and this afternoon. This has been really great learning from all of our peers in South Florida. Just for a little bit of background of myself, I came from an MPO that was able to help campaign and implement a surtax in Indianapolis, and watched from 3 years later a dedicated lane BRT system be implemented and be on the ground. And it's now about 30% of their ridership for their transit service. So I believe in this effort and this mission as our county and as the TPA to make this happen. But for us to look at the 561 plan and our mobility vision for our region, I just first wanted to reiterate who we are as the TPA. And we are a federally mandated agency that makes policies on local transportation issues, as all of you know in this room. And we allocate federal and state money for transportation improvement projects. And we're led by our 21 locally elected officials and our governing board. Many of you are those members of that board, and you help us plan for our mission and vision as an agency, which is to collaboratively plan, prioritize, and fund a transportation system in a safe, efficient, and connected multimodal way. And we do that by having our 3 core documents, which is our long-range transportation plan that helps establish that mobility vision for our region, and our TIP program that looks at our 5-year forecast and how we can fund those projects to help improve, to implement that mobility vision. And then our unified working program that refines the vision and helps kind of act as our budget as an agency as we move forward. But the big reason why we need this mobility vision, and it's reiterating a lot of what was talked about from Broward and Miami-Dade, is that traffic congestion is back. We saw a little bit of a drop in congestion during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But as we've seen some of the regulations or restrictions return back, and we're seeing people return back to work, we've also seen that congestion start to go up in all aspects of or areas of our county and on many of our state highways. And a big component that might be unique to just South Florida compared to other parts of the country is that we're seeing an exploding population of people coming here to work. The BDB announced that there is 3,000 new and retained jobs between October of 2020 to September of 2021. I'm one of those that have come here in that time window. And 71% of those new jobs were from relocations, also me being one of those. And so we see that we're seeing the impact on our current infrastructure growing, and also a demand for more infrastructure as we're seeing the growth in population. And so why we need to develop this mobility vision is for a few key points. One is to achieve the TPA objectives that we've identified in our long-range transportation plan that was adopted by our governing board. To accommodate the growth and economic development that we're seeing as that massive migration down to Palm Beach County, and for new jobs and new residential, there's going to be massive influx and growth that's going to need our transportation system to accommodate that, and also to be able to provide predictability to entice our private investors and make sure we are investing in mobility options to promote more safe and efficient system. And as a big part of this conversation today is we need to figure out how we're going to fund that mobility vision. And a big part of that is going to be through a local transportation surtax, like we've all been discussing today, because it can help build projects that are currently not affordable within our existing revenue system, and also help construct, operate, and new mobility services once built. As Javier mentioned, the operations and maintenance is really critical. We have lots of capital funding with our transportation improvement program, and also federal grant programs and state grant programs, but we need to be able to maintain and operate that system. And then also attract those federal and state discretionary grants that are available, because it's like Nick Uren, our executive director, likes to say, local funds are sticky. So whether it's a lasagna or a honey pot, we got whatever kind of food you want to talk about when it comes to local funding. If we get that local funding source, it becomes a key component to attracting other funds to make this system and those mobility vision a possibility. And we're seeing that with our South Florida peers. Miami was able to attract $200 million with their surtax, or $200 million in federal and state grants because of their surtax for the South Dade Transitway. They're also allowed to start negotiations with Brightline for FEC passenger rail easement that we learned from Javier. And also Broward has been able to start kicking off discussions with FDOT for FEC passenger rail on their corridor as well, their portion of the FEC in Broward County as well. And that's something that is a desire of Palm Beach County for that coastal link. And we've desperately wanted to continue to move towards getting that passenger rail. We need to have that money to bring to the table before we can start the discussions. And so what is that vision? Going back to that safe, efficient, and connected multimodal transportation system. Starting with safe, we need to build complete streets for all transportation users of all ages and abilities, and to eliminate the traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries. We are trying to organize as an agency how we can accomplish those goals through our Complete Streets policy and Complete Streets guidelines that Alyssa Frank, our bike ped coordinator, helps lead. Also with the Vision Zero action plan to identify key locations where there's serious injuries and fatal crashes happening more frequently, and how we can improve our transportation system around those areas. For efficiency, we want to invest in the smart roadways and traffic signals. Again, like we learned from our peers, the traffic signals are a key component to making the transportation system efficient. And the TPA has invested funding in transit signal prioritization at all the intersections along US 1 where the Route 1 Palm Tran route operates. And that is set for construction, I believe, in 2023. And so the Palm Train is working closely with those, using those funds from the TPA with the county and Boca Raton to implement that. And then a key part is that connected and multimodal. We want to continue to grow the walk, bike, and transit options for our community to help accommodate growth and enhance prosperity. And that mobility vision, when we look at a map, is we have our 561 transit corridors. Again, it's that 5 north-south, 6 east-west to create that one connected system. And those key corridors, they are all of our transit corridors that right now operate at the are the highest operating corridors on our Palm Transit network, as well as adding our FEC corridor and the tri-rail into that as well. We also want to improve the connecting state roadways through better pedestrian connectivity. We also acknowledge that there are, because of the growth, we need to accommodate for growth out west and see that the county road widening projects are a component of this, as well as traffic signal investments and also improving bike ped connectivity on county roads. Then also providing funding for municipal facilities and services to make sure that their mobility visions at the municipal level is able to accommodate their communities, but also connect into the regional goal of having a safe and efficient and connected multimodal transportation system. And so a big part of why we need to do this is because of a couple questions. And I have this first one: does infrastructure drive development? First, here's a picture of our West Palm Brightline station from the parking garage that many of you might have parked at today in 2016 after it was constructed. And here's the same shot today, as you can't see the station because there's 2 new residential buildings that have been built. There's a new office tower and there's a new senior residential building that's being constructed right now. We've seen a huge economic growth because of an infrastructure investment in our community. But if we flip it on the other side of, does economic development and good economic development, walkable areas drive infrastructure demand? And I think the answer is yes as well, because here's the Brightline corridor right by Meisner Park. And Boca Raton and Brightline have decided to invest in a Brightline station at this location. And so we're seeing that when we make conscious efforts in not just our mobility vision, but also in our economic and land use opportunities, both work together to drive the need and demand for more safe and efficient options to how to get places. And so how will we achieve this? I'm going to wrap this up here, is collaboratively refine mobility vision elements now. The TPA has, since we have adopted our 561 plan, we finalized the US 1 multimodal corridor study. I am project managing the Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7 multimodal corridor study that many of you will see a presentation update at the December 16th meeting that we'll be finalizing in March of 2022. In year 2022 calendar year, we are launching a Lake Worth Road and Forest Hill multimodal corridor study. We're doing those at the same time, as well as doing an operations and cost analysis of the commuter rail service on the FEC corridor and the extension to the VA hospital. That's also part of our 561 plan. We want to continue to do those so we could get a good idea of how much or what is feasible for our mobility vision, especially when it comes to transit, and how much it's going to cost. So we have a good idea of what we need to go to the ballot in 2024. And while we're doing that, we also want to figure out how we can maximize the existing federal and state funds that we have now and try to pursue flexibility to help fund transportation projects that are selected by the TPA board. And then big part, we need to consider that transportation surtax option in November of 2024 to replace our infrastructure surtax once it sunsets in 2026, I believe is what it was initially designed to complete by. And so it's going to be a lot of work, but we're going to continue working together as an agency with all of our representatives on our board and their municipalities in the county to try to pursue this kind of mobility vision for our region. So I have a question slide, but if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer. I also have Mr. Euler help me with as well. But I believe we've talked about this a lot with all of you over time.
I think you're off the hook.
Sounds good.
All right, let me finish this off. I want everybody to make note of the fact we're going to be finishing a few minutes early. So I would like to thank our friends from Broward for coming up. It was very, very nice of you to share with us your experience. And obviously, we don't want to be reinventing the wheel. The experience in Miami-Dade and Broward is going to give us a lot of an opportunity to understand the mistakes you may have made along the way. Hopefully, we don't make them again. And obviously, it's our hope that if we do go forward with an initiative for a surtax in 24, that we can have our stakeholders embrace it the first time around. Mr. Reinhardt, thank you very much for putting this together. It was a very well thought out agenda. And as I say, I am very happy to see that we are finishing on time. If no one else has any other comments, anybody down in the peanut gallery? I'm seeing no one raise the microphone.